Are live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Seisha. I'm the social media manager at Charis and More, which is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore, and also Charis Circle, which is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis. And I'm so excited to present tonight's event, which is a celebration of the Black Joy Project, featuring 117 full-color photos and 8 breathtaking essays on a force that fuels Black life all around the globe. This is Humans of New York meets the Longbook. Tonight we have Susana Morris as our conversation partner. Susana Morris is the Associate Professor of Literature, Media, and Communications at Georgia Tech. She's been an Anschutz Distinguished Fellow at Princeton University and was most recently the Norman Freeling Visiting Professor at the University of Michigan. She's the co-founder of the Crunk Feminist Collective and has written for Gawker, Longreads, Cosmopolitan, and Ebony, and has also been featured on NPR, BBC, Essence Magazine, and the New York Times.
Come on, Biggest accomplishment.
And the person of the hour is Kleaver Cruz. Kleaver is the creator of the Black Joy Project, which is a digital and real-world affirmation that Black joy is resistant. Kleaver is also a member of We Are All Dominican, which is a US-based grassroots collective that works in solidarity with movements led by Dominicans of Haitian descent fighting for inclusion and citizenship rights in the Dominican Republic. Kleaver believes in the power of words to write the stories that did not exist when they needed them the most. I'm going to hand it off to Susana to get us started.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Y'all are a beautiful crowd.
Yes.
Even the folks that I cannot see online, I know y'all are beautiful too. So I'm here tonight with dear Kleaver. I'm so proud of you, friend, for doing this. This is, first of all, the book is beautiful. It's such a beautiful text. So, do you want to start off with a reading a little bit,
sure.
or it's really however you want to flow? I have tons of questions, and I know the audience does too, both in person and online. If you want to maybe contextualize a little bit with a reading, and
Sure.
we can talk.
First, I want to start with gratitude.
Let's start with gratitude. Let's start there.
I want to thank my ancestors. Ramona Vizcaíno, Nelson Vizcaíno, Ali Cruz, Zoila Perez, the people I know by name and the ones I don't. That are ancestors, not just mine, because they become collective in that realm, did whatever they needed to do so that we could be here and cross paths tonight. And may that reason reveal itself tonight or someday after. And I want to thank y'all. There is so many amazing people from different parts of my life in this audience, but I want to start with a very special shout out, even though she's on her phone right now. No, I'm kidding. I just want to this is a very important person in my life, Mrs. Fields. She was my second grade teacher. She's the one who opened the door for me that when she read Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, my little 8-year-old son popped up out of the chair and was like, Miss Fields, how do I be like Maya? And she was like, easy, write a book. I actually brought it so y'all can see this. I wrote this book in second grade. This has been it's really important. This has been my compass for all the times that I forgot what my calling was, or I wasn't sure what to do. This book kept coming back to me.
30 years old.
Yes, it's literally almost 30 years old. And yeah, just thank you, Miss Fields, because you said yes to me. That's all you had to do. That's all you had to do. So please, let's give Miss Fields a flowers. Yeah, I'm just really thankful for y'all for doing whatever. As my bestie always says, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here. And for that, I'm very thankful. So I'm just gonna read a little bit from this little thing, the Black Joy Project, just to contextualize it really quickly. The Black Joy Project started very simply. I was just sad. I woke up feeling very sad, and I wasn't sure what to do about that. And I had what I can only describe as a very spiritual experience. It really was like a rush of thoughts, memories, feelings, all kinds of things. And then literally the words black and joy floating above me, figuratively, or not. But the point was that it was just a very spiritual experience for me. And it felt like a calling. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. But I remembered in that moment a picture of my mom. And so, shout out to my mom. And so I posted it on Facebook when that was more of a thing. LOL. And I just wrote a stream of consciousness saying 2015, again, to contextualize, is like a year after Mike Brown Jr.'s murder. This was months after Sandra Bland was found killed, or dead, I should say, in a prison in Texas. And so a lot was happening, and my thought, or my impulse was, it wasn't that we needed to ignore that, it was that we needed to add or amplify something inside of that. And so I decided personally that I was going to do that for 30 days. And then if I felt better, hopefully. And after a couple of weeks, people started reaching out to me saying like, hey, this is making me feel good. Can you please keep doing this? Or I had a bad nightmare and this calmed me down enough to go back to sleep. And so I was thinking, this might be a little bit bigger than me feeling better. And so that's when I decided to call it something. That's when I gave it the name of the Black Joy Project. And so now it's been 8 years as of last December of just traveling and connecting with Black people in all kinds of contexts. And that this book is a reflection of my notes in that journey, but also research, amazing art, like one of the artists that's in the room in the back, Jamaica, give me. Her image is the dedication of the book. It's perfectly placed. When it was placed there for the first time by the designer, I don't know how my editor didn't jump out of her chair of how moved she was. Shout out to Rikia Clark. Yeah, I also want to acknowledge the people that it takes to make a book happen. My name is on the cover, but a lot of people work hard to make something like this happen. And in my case, some of those people, namely Rikia Clark, who's my editor, which is a blessing to have a Black woman as an editor for a project like this, that her and I met under the auspices of agreeing this was a tool, not just some product to sell or push into the world. And that's why I said yes, because corporations, and the designer, her name is Renata de Oliveira, who I met with her one time on Zoom, and she designed the whole book. And it's very clear that she read the book when you look through these pages and see the placement of the images. There's 53 other people that contributed work to this book. Artists from all over the world, from Australia, different parts of Africa, Europe, the Caribbean. So a lot of people went into this project. Beatrice Jason, who's a marketer, so the reason you see this thing everywhere is another Black woman that's behind this or pushing this. Yeah, and my publicist, Maureen Cole. It just takes a lot of people. And a lesson I've learned in this process is that those people don't get celebrated enough, which is why I'm saying their names. Because we need to be invested in all the other people that are behind the book and not just the person who's their name on it. Because I didn't do this by myself. And this was an almost 4-year project. And the trust of people like Jamaica who didn't know me from a hole in the wall outside an email saying, hey, you don't know me, but can I have your work in my book? Has been really, really amazing. And that this book was written for the people who read, for the people who never read. And if you only love art, there's a whole conversation visually too. But yeah, so go get you a copy if you have it. But I'm gonna read from chapter 3, which is called The Yes And it's about this acting technique, which I'm sure a bunch of you have heard. That when I was thinking about it more deeply, it felt like something applicable. And I'm not the first person to say this at all, but it's very applicable to life, this principle of yes and. We can hold two truths at once. That joy exists alongside pain is not a contradiction. There's not necessarily a brighter side, but rather a reality and how we decide to engage with it. Black joy is a kind of yes and to this challenging reality. In improvisational acting, yes and is a foundational principle that requires an actor to accept what is happening in a scene, that's the yes, and then add information to move the accepted knowledge forward in some way, that's the and. Yes and is about building a scene from nothing off the top of your head alongside others. This strategy of performance uses our full imaginations. It is what actor, healer, and creative producer Clotilde L. Horn described in a conversation I had on this topic with her as a practice of, quote, transformation that evolves into a new reality and shifts the circumstance, end quote. Imagine two actors pretending to be on a playground full of children running around. They are having the time of their lives, soaking up the sun on their brown skin. One actor turns to the other and asks, "Can you see the finish line?" The second actor smiles, now panting. "Yes, and when we're done with this marathon, there will be so many snacks." A simple example, but one that speaks to the power within our reach to cause significant change in the tangible world. This principle can be applied beyond the world of acting and used as a tool when combined with joy. If we first consider improvisation in regard to life, it is something that Black people do all the time, whether it is through the legal and systemic restrictions that force them to innovate and improve their lives, like the birth of hip hop in the Sedgwick projects of the Bronx, shout out to that BX, always and forever, or the decision to hide grains of rice into cornrow style hair in the long journey into forced captivity. The yes in yes and calls for the acknowledgement of a situation or circumstance as it is at that moment in time. That recognition then leads to an opportunity to shift it in some way, the and. By accepting that the world is messed up, that there are systems historically in place to harm, limit, and kill Black people altogether, then the space opens to change those conditions accordingly. This, of course, is much easier said than done, and it takes more than only some people using this lens. This principle is also linked to imagination, the creation of what does not yet exist to address what already does. Imagination is one of the most radical tools Black people have access to, and as with joy, it is something that cannot be taken away. Like improvisational acting, it takes practice to develop and strengthen the skills to create shifts, often on the fly, that lead to necessary change. These skills help both to navigate the complexities of this anti Black world and to make the reality that serves us best that much more real. In the 11 years, 1866 to 1877, immediately after the Civil War and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation that freed millions of Black people in the United States, the country entered what Congress named Reconstruction. It is a time when Black people who were legally freed from bondage, unless a crime was committed as per the 13th Amendment, among other exceptions, got into the documentary, and the country at large had to reestablish what the nation looked like. In this new era, Black people built and grew their lives in ways that had never been possible before. It was an era with a record number of Black politicians, business owners, and professionals. Many free Black people forged new paths toward rebuilding their lives in a complicated nation. It was also an era of experimentation and artistic expression, as Black people all over the country figured out what this new status would look like for them. Of those many people, one was a queen. Born in Maryland 4 years before Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Act of 1862 that freed enslaved people in the District of Columbia, William Dorsey Swan spent the early part of his life in bondage. It was in the 1880s, when Swan was in his 20s, that he appeared in newspaper articles that described private parties he'd organized with fellow Black queer folks in the DC area. The parties got media attention at the time for being raided by the police. We can thank historian and writer Channing Gerard Joseph, author of the biography House of Swan, Where Slaves Became Queens and Changed the World, for discovering those newspaper clips more than a century later and unlocking a valuable piece of queer history for the world. Joseph uncovered Swan's indelible mark on history as the first documented and self-proclaimed, quote, queen of drag, or what we today call a drag queen. At a time when Black people in the US were reestablishing themselves as newly free people, Swan and his community gatherings were incredibly transgressive by any standards, and definitely those of the late 19th century. Swan and his crew existed at the margins of the margin, so it was there that they created their yes and. Their yes emerged despite not embodying what both society and Black communities considered appropriate at the time, and even perceived as a threat towards societal progress. Joseph's scholarship describes Swan's parties as, quote, particularly significant in light of 19th century attitudes towards masculinity. Swan and his community in DC came together often at high costs, knowing they could be thrown into jail or publicly humiliated, that they would be willing to live their truths, fully self-expressed. is a sign of how much it mattered. Those gatherings that Swan and his friends created for one another served as the early seeds for what has become a long history of Black queer gatherings and spaces that celebrate the TLGBTQIA plus community in its fullest. It has led to spaces like today's ballroom scenes that offer lifelines for people all around the world who still are not fully loved and respected as much as they should be in broader society. Swan's parties offered moments of Black joy in a really specific way. It was not an escape or an opportunity to look away from the realities of the world. It was the opportunity to say yes. The world is not as it should be, and to choose joy as a valid option toward addressing what is not working. For Swan and his comrades, it was yes. The world may not love us, and that does not mean we cannot love ourselves.
That was perfect. That was perfect. So you talked about the sort of genesis of the project, but could you talk a bit more about your process?
Sure.
And sort of, you talked about collaborating sort of on the back end towards the end, but what was like initial after that sort of spiritual moment of seeing Black joy and then putting out kind of a call on Facebook and so on, and then it developing into a series of photos and then this book? Could you talk about sort of your larger artistic process?
It was just me and this at the beginning. Actually, it was just literally looking through my phone of what pictures that I already have. And so I was defining Black joy for people. And then after that first 30 days, I had to go to New Orleans, for work. And towards the end of it, we were working out of this, I can't remember right now, but it's a Black couple that owns a small art gallery in Uptown in New Orleans. And so we were working out of there, and something told me to speak to the director about this thing that had less than 100 people paying attention to it. And so I spoke to her, and first she said, "I'm already following you." And I'm like, "What?" It's like 10 people.
Right.
And so that was like, okay, affirmation. And then something told me to ask her, "What does Black joy mean to you?" And then that was the shift of recognizing as a writer that I'm not someone to assume how language. There's a singer, La Concha Buica, she's a Afro-Spanish singer. And she always says, I only know the place from which I sing, not from which one listens. That got me of like, this is like one of those things that it means something different to different people. And so it was more interesting to ask people what it meant to them, but also as a way to shift power.
Yeah.
If we can define joy for ourselves, that gives us a certain power. And that felt important for people to define. If we're always being restricted in so many other ways, naturally it makes sense to give us our own space to define what this thing means to us. So the process was, can I take your picture with my phone? And then usually it was a long conversation, and then hopefully I would remember to take their picture. I would just get caught up. One time I hand wrote an interview for an hour, and I'm like, I could have recorded that. I was just like, "Wow, you want to talk to me?" So a lot of it was just no plan, still no plan of, oh my God, somebody wants to talk to me, or I guess I'll go to Brazil and talk to hundreds of people that I don't know about this thing, but we're gonna find a way. It's just been very spiritually led, this thing. It really has been. All of this has been a test and a lesson on faith, to really have faith and trust whatever God, the universe, that little voice in your chest, that pang is telling you to move towards it. So that's all that. It's been very organic of, oh yes, we'll do an oral history archive with you in the middle of a winter storm, and hopefully people will come and volunteer. Or like, sure, let's have a radio show for summer. I don't know how to do that, but okay.
We're gonna find out.
So it's really been that. Oh, you want to do a photo booth? Okay. I guess I'll figure that out. That's really been all these planes being built as we're flying them, but it's been okay because the word that just came is texture, of like, it's been able to help me create a texture, which is always my goal as a writer, is to have thickness.
So I want to build on that. You talked about just your phone and yourself, right? So can we talk about the visual element?
Sure.
So you see I have all these tabs here, and I have some notes to myself. I mean, all the photos, the drawings, the portraits are beautiful, but there's some that, I mean, okay, let me go to this one that
My grandmother.
Your grandmother, that's actually the one I was thinking about. She's so beautiful. It's on page 183.
Which is a very divine thing that when I'm a tourist, when we came into the world, the first apartment we lived on was on 183rd Street.
Yeah. Oh, and there she is.
No coincidence.
Yes. So could you talk about just the process of like, okay, you went and you were interviewing people, you're going places from here to there, and I also want to talk about your travels and how they catalyze your thinking. But there's the visual element is so strong in this book, right? Like, could you talk about what sort of significance? I mean, we have an artist here in the room, right? Including so many visual elements, and your citation practices are serious, right? I really love that.
Really scared.
No, I mean the way that
It's the academia because
right. It's like you gotta cite it, you gotta write. You know, you cite everybody. You're like, this is this person's picture, but also it's embedded within the text. Could you talk about like your photo booths that you had that you set up online in terms of the platform? I mean, I knew you before, but like, you know, I remember just seeing like the pictures coming out and being like, man, Kleaver's really doing a big thing with photography. And so could you talk about sort of the role of the visual arts in terms of Black Joy?
Originally, it was that my thought was if we can see ourselves in a certain way, be reflected, not necessarily smiling, but just if we can see ourselves expressing joy, that can do something. And again, like this was in the wake of what later would become another wave in 2020, but this was like 6 years before that of my personal of how the F am I gonna get through this? Because I was dealing with my own grief of losing my uncle, rest in peace, of just a lot of things that it felt at that moment needed to be visual. And then like a year or two later, during one of the photo booths at Afropunk, there was somebody on the line that was deaf. And that was a moment of pause of like, okay, so it can't just be a visual project. In this case, this person can see the images, but it made me think about what about visually impaired Black folks? What about all the other ways that we exist, that it couldn't just be a visual thing, which is why it became an oral history archive and all these other ways of accessing joy. But in terms of the photography, I'm an amateur, I'll be pretending. But then I learned to partner. There was somebody that we just kept running into each other, and then one day we're like, listen, this is not a coincidence. Like the 5th time we ran into each other. And so Dominique Sinde-Iganza, who's also in the book, he trusted me when I had no money or no plan or nothing. Just like, hey, you want to be in a tent for 12 hours for 2 days? And he's like, yeah. And so we partnered for a weekend, and he literally stood for 12 hours and took hundreds of portraits for 2 days. And that was amazing to experience that of people, people would get on lines, like, I don't even know what this is, I'm gonna get on the line. But then they would get on the line and talking to them, and then people connecting with each other on the line, still not knowing what's gonna happen at the end of the line. But they're all building and stuff. And in the Afropunk context, it was people from all over the place. So it was all kinds of Black folks. That just got me thinking about that too, of working with other artists and what does that look like. So then fast forward to the book. Originally, my vision was me, my writing, and Dom's portraits because we had so many of them. And then Rakia was like, nah, we need to think bigger. We need texture. She just kept saying like expansive. And so I spent almost 3 years finding amazing people like Jamaica. Just looking for all these different ways that artists are in this conversation around joy. And I was committed to it being from as many places in the world as possible, which is really amazing when you look through it. I'm still moved by it. There's pages where it looks like the same artist did it, and it's 2 totally different artists that probably haven't even met each other. And seeing like that I'm not crazy, like we really are in conversation. There's divine moments, like there's 3 pieces written by people that are not me. And that was also intentional to have voices outside of mine talking about joy. And one of them, Sister Zai, she's a Zimbabwean woman who has been living in Australia for the last 10 years. And so she wrote a poem about her relationship as a Black African woman to indigenous Black. She's calling it stolen Black land, BLAK. And at the end of that piece, like a painting by an indigenous Australian. That was not I didn't say any of that. The design just happened in that way, but that also felt like that's literally on paper solidarity of two kinds of Black people coming together around this thing and naming the truth as ugly of the violence towards indigenous people, and in this case, indigenous Black folks. And then another Black person reckoning with that, of their own privilege of being able to move to that place,
Right.
and what is her responsibility to those people, even though she's not from there. It's just very intuitive, a lot of the art and the visuals and stuff. Online, when I could get to it, because usually it's team of me to make things happen, it was just it's been very difficult to capture that on little squares on Instagram, all of this stuff. It's really difficult to put that into this small space because most of it has been is the in-between people type of thing and not the pictures. It's actually been all of these very powerful conversations and exchanges that only a sliver of it made it here because we could have been writing for years and years about it. But yeah, so that was, it's always like trying to build a thread through those things is my intention.
We talked about this on the phone.
Yeah.
We're in Atlanta.
Yeah.
We're in the South. How does the South sort of figure into the project in particular kinds of ways? It's very like wide-ranging diasporic. You're talking about Brazil, you're talking about the Netherlands, Suriname, all different parts of the Caribbean. You get into the Haitian-Dominican divide, which, you know, I love to talk about. All kinds of things, right? But like, how does like the kind of U.S. American South?
That's a good question. The two things that came to mind is one of them, like I was saying earlier, is the very first place that I came to after New York of deciding to call this a Black Juror Project was New Orleans. And so that was a huge turning point to meet this woman who's a director who's saying like, I'm into this already. That felt like a sign. And then the second one was, which I talk about, I don't remember, I think in the community chapter, this comrade Vivian Anderson, who started an organization called Every Black Girl in Columbia, South Carolina. After in 2015, when you all probably saw it, the student who got slammed in her desk, Vivian saw that and then saw this news report of one of those girls, the one girl in the class who stood up. And Naya, her name is Naya, and she heard Naya say, I just felt like somebody needed to do something. And so Vivian was like, I need to do something. And she's humble, so she kept saying, I just wanted to give them a hug. But Viv kept going from Brooklyn to Columbia back and forth for weeks. And then eventually it became weeks at a time, then months at a time. And now she lives there and has established this incredible organization for not just Black girls, but the people who support them too. That she's been making it a point to demonstrate what is celebrating both Black girls and the people behind them, which I think is really important. And that I got to be a part of that journey through her conferences. So she does 2 or 3 conferences a year where she invites local people and people to come to Columbia to lead workshops and be in community with the girls and other people that work with her. Those 2. And then the other one is just my thoughts in general about this country, is that the liberation is going to come from the South and the Midwest, not the coast, even though I'm a New Yorker, even though we get the most shine as like, if you're from the West Coast or the East Coast, but I'm very clear that the change is actually going to come from the South and the Midwest. That's where the people are for real, in a way that there's things happening whether people are paying attention or not. And so me writing about some of the things happening in the American South is a way to amplify that of, we got to pay attention because the change is not just happening in New York and LA, it's happening in many, many other parts of this country.
Yeah, and it's also like a rejection of this notion that we're just left behind. You know what I mean? So whenever you see like the news coming out of, not necessarily Atlanta so much, but I'm thinking of like all the reproductive justice news coming out of Alabama, right? And folks are like, well, of course, you know, that's what would happen in a place like Alabama. It's like, our folks are there. Right. That's us. It's not like some random people, you know what I mean? And there's a way in which that kind of postal elitism, I mean, I don't mean in the Fox News kind of way, I mean in that, so on the far left, right, where folks are like, Yeah, I mean, they're backwards here anyway, so it only matters if we're in the Bay or New York or something like that. That's just not the case.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Let me ask one more question before I open it up, because I'm sure the audience has lots of questions, right? And I think there are probably questions online too, right? Maybe?
Not yet, but you
Okay. You know, go on ahead and make those questions, people online. But what was the most kind of surprising thing that you discovered in this process of working on the book?
A few things. One is shout out to Veronica Dance, my therapist.
Shout out to the therapist. Shout out to the therapist.
Veronica, she spoke into me so many times. But that's to say, one was, I was very, you know, if you ever prepare something to be in public, it can come with anxiety and this type of thing. So I was very in my head of like, it's been 3 years, like, oh my gosh. Also terrified of all these people that trusted me to put their art in the book, like really defending them and the behind the scenes of like, these people need to be protected and that type of thing. Not that they were in danger, but just feeling this overprotectiveness of Black artists in like this corporate setting of these people are trusting me. So all of these anxieties. And then the book came out and I felt this calm. It's like this huge wave of peace of I can't do anything about it at this point. I've already done my best. And that felt like a moment from my life, not just a book of to chill, because I'm an Aquarius, so I'll be overthinking. you know. The other one, another huge surprise was the art of just like the synergy between the images was really powerful. Obviously, I was the only person that had seen all of it.
Right.
But you know, it's like on a computer and it's not laid out, and then I'm making like a janky canvas spread to sort of give inspiration to the designer. But once I saw it all together, I literally cried. I was just so moved to like the artist proved what I was saying of we actually are in this bigger world conversation, and how it complemented my writing. You know, even some of the other written pieces of how, again, even though I was working with each writer for like a year and change, and walking them through the process, but seeing it together at the end of this really is a conversation of sorts. And some of us literally saying the same things of like, we can't just, there's a piece by, her name is Munganyende, and she's Rwandan, and she grew up in the Netherlands after her family had to leave from the civil war in Rwanda in the 90s. And she says something that I say too in the book of, we can't just be thinking about the revolution and what we're going to take down. We got to think about what happens afterwards. What's the vision of that world? Because history has shown us that when we don't think that far, we get more of the same again. That even in like the Haitian Revolution, for example, that was very thought out. History showed that some things still lingered or repeated in terms of like French culture and the preference towards that. Just to give an example, but the point is, those types of moments of like, I'm not bugging.
Yeah.
You know, like other people have this thought too. And also realizing that my thoughts on this are distinct. That we're in a moment where Black joy is very much in the zeitgeist, which means that it's getting co-opted and commodified and commercialized and that type of thing, and being reduced into this thing of they're smiling. That's joy. See, they're not complaining. They're not suffering. When my argument is no, we are, and we get to experience joy in the face of that. That has been empowering to me. I'm not in the same thought pattern as some people around this thing. Yeah. And mine is more concerned about our whole wellness and not just a moment of feeling good.
Right. Joy versus happiness, which you talk about.
Exactly.
Right. Quoting bell hooks and also, you know, sort of churchiness too, right? Yeah. Like the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away, right?
Yeah.
And so that joy is this practice, it's a choice, you write in the book too. I loved two of the quotes that you mentioned from two of my favorite writers. One is Toni Cade Bambara, and my favorite essay on the issue of roles. And that penultimate paragraph, where she talks about what it means to be a revolutionary. Like you can't be a revolutionary, like you can't be passing out pamphlets about white supremacy and then you're at home going upside your, you know, your partner's head. Like that's not revolutionary, right? And so you remind us in a few places in the book, but particularly towards the end, quoting that. And so I thought that was really helpful, you know, to recognize that we have to be very clear about how we engage interpersonally, right? We can have our systemic critiques, But if how we actually move in the world doesn't match,
Exactly.
that ain't it, right?
Exactly.
And then you also, to your point about there being a synergy, but also you having a distinct contribution to the moment makes me think of the moment where you quote the late great Octavia E. Butler, right? That there may be nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns, right? And that there's a synergy between us, you know, but we can also discover particular kinds of ways that we fit in, right? So I think you're absolutely right that we're in this moment where people want to put like Black joy at Target, right? On a mug.
Which my book is
you know,
in.
hey, buy it at your local independent bookstore, like here's what's more. But also we're not mad. Sometimes people don't have a local independent bookstore and they go to Target and they get the stuff, right? But it's really about embodying that as a practice, as a life practice in particular.
It really is, because we're all we got. Is each other outside of or inside of these systems and those types of things, that it is really important for us to figure out who we want to be first as a way to hold each other accountable and ourselves. I write in a book about, to me, if Black joy was a shape, it would be a circle, because of that collectivity of that. Just something, joy is a human thing, it's not specific to any one group. But when I hear Black joy or feel that, it always feels collective. And to me, that's very important, because time has always shown us that it's us. It's never been an I thing that got us through anything. And we have to remember that. And that for me in this book, it's been an effort inside of that we is, who is the we? And that for me, the we has been Black queer folks, Black trans folks, Black women, Black femmes, the people in the room. We're the ones who usually show up for everything. So what does it look like for our stories to be centered and prioritized in a certain way? And for other folks within these communities to witness us, to listen to us, to prioritize our joys, because we're the backbones. And so if we well, then everybody's well. It still feels important to name that, because we're still in a moment that doesn't always uplift all of us really, like namely Black queer and trans folks. It still be feeling like we over here like doing the thing for everybody, and then everybody else is deciding whether or not we're worthy enough for that liberation. That's just not right. And so for me, it's just literally is. It's not like, oh, here's the queer story. It's just literally in the thread of the book.
Completely, not no special section off.
Because we're not sensational and exceptional. We're here all the time, everywhere and every room. That I wanted it to feel that way too, for the folks that I was just about to laugh when people be like, I never been around a queer person or that you know of. But the point is, let's say you do have that thought, you can read this and understand to recognize those people around you. That if I only did that, then that feels like progress.
Well, you definitely did that. Yeah. I want to see if there are any questions in the audience.
We have some questions online.
Ooh.
So we have one question from, I'm guessing your brother Walter.
Hey, Walter.
Who asks, it sounds like you've been hitting the ground running since the book launched. Can you share how you practice self-care as you continue on your book?
One of them, I don't have it, but I have a travel size of Florida water. Get into it. Because people be laying their burdens to you. And I was prepared for that. I really was. I had a little stint in publishing for like almost 2 years, a couple of years ago. So I got to witness that at these types of events, the ways that people are very open, which is fine. I'm not telling you none of y'all to not be vulnerable. I'm just saying, because I've been there, you feel connected and you feel like this person understands something about you. And I'm a very receptive person, so I'm not gonna turn you away. But I've learned, shout out to Veronica Dance again, my therapist, boundaries, and to figure out what's mine and what's not, what's yours and what's mine, so that I'm not walking away feeling depleted after one of these events. So Florida water, splash. I have like a moment of meditation and prayer before each of these things to ask, what is the message? What is the intention of whatever is going to happen tonight? Which that makes me think too with the artists when you're asking about process, was literally all of them. it wasn't just me being excited about seeing their images. It was asking spirit, is this the right person to be a part of this? Is their energy supposed to be a part of this? Because I don't know these people, so I need your support to affirm that this isn't just because terrible people make beautiful things all the time. That I didn't want that to be a part of this, especially when I didn't know you, because this is my life work. I'm not. This isn't just a party on a page that this is cute for people to buy. So that each person that I asked to be a part of this, there already was this like affirming process before they even said yes or no, of knowing like, no, we are aligned spiritually to be in this thing together. But yeah, so just trying to stay aligned in those ways. I'll be wearing my little black George chain.
That's right.
It's also repping New York. Just those little things of always, all of these rings are handmade things, made mostly in West Africa, of just being anchored in handmade things, of things that these are techniques that are millennia years old, that people have spent a long time passing to each other how to do this thing with their hands. That it feels like an homage to that too, that carry these type of talismans, so to speak.
It's a lot of spiritual hygiene over here.
Yeah.
That was a great question. That was a great question. Thanks.
Yeah. Wait, shout out to Holiday also, who just raised their hand, because he reached out to me saying, hey, my auntie got this book, and then I saw the book, and oh my God, it's you. And was like, you need to come to Atlanta, and I could connect to the Charis books. So thank you, Holiday.
Yeah.
Because Holiday is also part of my own journey around figuring out these things related to gender, of asking really important questions in these workshops that we did together some years ago around masculinity that got me thinking. And here I am, so thank you.
I'm so proud. This is awesome. This is really awesome. Congratulations. This question just came to me about, I know that we're definitely complexifying the concept of joy. And yes, and as you're on this tour, how do you ever feel pressure to override any hard feelings, or to put on for book readings, or if you're feeling stressed or down or pressured and you need to be public, how are you present with that while also, workshopping this?
Yesterday's a great example. I was bone tired. I was in Oakland / the Bay Area over the weekend, so I was still catching up. And I totally forgot I said yes to do some gig online at like 7:30, 6:30 at night. And the whole day I'm like, I'm so tired. But something told me to just do it anyways. Then I'm going back and forth with like, should I tell these people I'm very tired? So like, this is what you're gonna get. But I'm tired. And then I'm like, oh my God, but they're paying me and yada yada. But the point was, I told myself, well, it was actually reading the book again. Something about like revisiting it reminds me of my hands start tingling, even today, of like, it feels like Matilda when she'd be like flipping through the book. It's like, and here is where I need to read. But yeah, so just that tingling feeling is only I get when something right is happening. That it was like, okay, I am supposed to talk to this group of people, because that was a community of grad students trying to figure out and heal through something that had happened last semester. That it was like, okay, so I can contribute to that. And that is what I signed up to do. That's why I went through therapy for 3 or 4 years and that type of things, because I wanted to be well to the extent that I can show up for other people for real. Because that's what I feel like one of my responsibilities is to do. But to your question, I'm also, the moment hasn't come yet because I'm still excited, but I'm not afraid to say I'm tired, or no, or it's not gonna happen today, or we need to reschedule, that type of thing, because it happened so much in the process of writing this book, of literally people going through cancer diagnosis and all these things, that there was times where I was like, is this gonna get done? And the people around me being like, you need to chill and take a break. So I literally had to like take a leave from grad school and stop working on the book to show up for my family and that type of thing, because we were going through. But it taught me to prioritize my well-being, because this ain't life and death to publish a book.
Right.
It's not. Whenever it was supposed to come out like 2 years ago. So just, I guess it's that faith thing again, of just trusting when it's supposed to come out. Because now I get to deal with y'all. This came out 2 years ago. We wouldn't have had this event maybe.
Yes.
So I have two questions. One, so the first one is, who was the first person you told about this project and why? And the second question is, what was a moment in this journey where you just knew, like, okay, this is the real deal? Like, you got that fire or that passion? Because I know it was a lot hearing other people's stories, and you seem like an empath. I'm not sure, but you know, that can kind of cloud your mind through the process. So yeah.
Probably Walter, my twin. That was the first person, and then Sarita, my bestie. Hey, Sarita. In terms of it was a lot of moments like that, but the one that just came to mind was in 2016. I got invited to represent the U.S. at this conference in Brazil. That was really intense. It was about like prejudice, incarceration, and racism as it affects young people in Latin America, and particularly Black youth in Brazil. And so I think it was like the second panel. It was hosted in the biggest university in Latin America is in Sao Paulo, and I was at the law school, which is like the widest, most conservative space, and one of them in Latin America, which was all part of the intention, was to have this transgression of Black activists in this space, shifting it. But anyways, so I'm on this stage, there's hundreds of people in the audience, and I had somebody translating for me. And when we were getting towards the end of my translation, I like noticed a pause, and I looked over, and Anna, who was translating, was crying about what I was saying. And her just feeling so moved by that, what I was talking about with joy, that felt like something's clicking right there. I don't even speak Portuguese. And my translator is the person who's feeling these emotions while having to, and then of course I'm crying with her. So we're all crying, English, Spanish, Portuguese. There was this very moving moment, of like, language doesn't actually matter in that way, that we see each other in certain ways. And I had to fly all the way to that part of the world to understand that, but it was really powerful. And that her and I have stayed friends because like she's had Christmas dinner at my house. Of that just built something for me that was very, very affirming. But I will also say I'm blessed that there's been a lot of moments like that.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So your book has like visual elements and then the written elements. I'm wondering about what you were listening to as you were.
That's a great question. If you go to the blackbirdproject.com, there's a playlist. Over the course of, because I'm very much a music person. Yeah, just one day I'm like, there should be a playlist to this. So as I was writing, I would just add songs to it. And now there's probably like 30 hours or something of music on it. But yeah, it was slowly adding this music to this list, thinking that other people might enjoy this once I'm done. But it was just private while I was writing it. And that was another way to like practice the globalness, because once you listen to it, you'll see that it's all kinds of languages and types of music that are in there. Yeah, it's all kinds of music. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole playlist.
Cool.
You should check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Miss Fields,
All right.
yes.
If You Get Your Flowers was a person, this is the moment for me. But I want to say that you did start off with gratitude, and I just want you guys to know that he's so real, and I keep looking at him as my second grade student who is so eager to come in and so curious about everything, and enriched my, life as a teacher. Now, don't make me cry, but it made me happy to come to school every morning, because you have a student like this, then you have a twin. I had both of them. So it's great, and to see him, what he's evolved to is just beautiful. And I just want to thank you, Walter, for enriching my life, making my teaching in second grade. I didn't want to leave school because I had something like this waiting for me every morning. But I just want to say thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Fields is like, if you ever watched The Magic School Bus, She's like the blackness frizzle, really.
Well,
Yeah,
we better
always-
dress because the outfit.
Okay.
Y'all not seeing it. This feels is killing it.
I don't know what to wear.
But it was your excitement, really. It was contagious. It just way after of understanding our context, like I didn't think about kids. Everybody didn't. Like some kids went to school and paid for lunch out. Like I didn't get our situation in District 9. And for you to understand that and it just always felt like you brought the world to us. Like you understood the world can be brought to y'all. Y'all are not limited by being in Section 8 housing or any of these things. Like you get to have whatever anybody else in the world gets to have. That we were little kids in the Bronx, didn't know any better. And I still remember random things I'm not gonna get into, but the gratitude is so mutual because I felt like you cared about us as people. You understood us as people, not just your responsibility as a teacher. That you like cared for my mom too. I think about that. My mom was really, really young. Really young. She was like in her 20s with twins. That all of that is beyond the calling of a teacher. And now having been a teacher in a bunch of different situations, I'm very clear of how exceptional that is of you. So that's why I always have to give you your flowers whenever I see you. Because you're not like everybody else.
Thank you.
Shout out Miss Field.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I can't take it anymore.
So, question and gratitude, because, thank God for Miss Fields.
Yeah.
First of all, like Kleaver said, like we didn't know each other. And one of the things that has been so special to me about this process, emotions, the way you invited. And what I've said to people over and over again was like, you invited the way I invite. You invited like you knew me, like you cared about me, like you cared about my whole, and I just kept on reading it like, who is? I read the email so many times. Like, did I miss something? Do I know these people? Like, how did they? It was so thoughtful for me. And then throughout the process, you would call them delays, but they just felt divine. Because one of my favorite moments was every time there was a change in schedule, Kleaver would send a video. And immediately I was just like, thank you for your thoughtfulness. And I'm praying for you. It was mesmerizing to see what for me felt like a glimpse of your organizing practice. And it was this time frame that you were trying to get this book into the world. So much was happening in all of our lives. And when you would have a delay and you would send one of these videos, it would make me slow down. I had a lot of comment with you in these videos, and I was like, oh, okay. So Kleaver is saying, y'all, hold fast, I'll be back. And in those moments, each time, I would mimic you and slow down a little bit, And so, thank you. I was going through so much when you reached out. And to get from there to here, grateful you prayed, grateful to be a part of this. It's an honor.
Those videos are fun.
Videos are super fun. So, question,
Yes.
because I was about to go into a crying fit. What made you do the videos?
I think it was just to take a break from, because remember, this was like 3 years ago, and everybody's getting, I hope your day is going well.
Yeah.
I hope this finds you well. Guilty, yeah, those are random things. But anyways, I'm like, let me try something else. And also, it was a way to be, what's it called, multimodal. That's why I was having, what's the word? Captions.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do like to read, you can read what I'm saying. But if you need a break from Zoom and all these other things, you could just watch me say something.
Yeah.
And it was also a way to hold myself accountable to y'all of nobody asked me to send y'all a bunch of emails and stuff, but it just felt important because again, I felt very protective of y'all, of people that don't know me that are trusting me with this thing. Whereas like there's this huge corporation that at the end of the day, they're concerned about looking nice to sell, not to reduce it, but that is part of what's happening. Whereas I'm over here being like, it's art and we got a community. That to me was like another way to cultivate that. I have to cultivate trust because we're going to be in each other's lives moving forward, not just in this behind the scenes thing. That I want people, and this is what I kept telling my editor too, is this process needs to have joy too. Like I'm not interested in just the project. The process has to reflect the things that I believe in, the things that I stand for. So the videos was that, and also just like a way to experiment with something new. And it was fun knowing that it was private, like it's just our little thing that other people won't see. Unless you forward it to somebody.
But I played it for my people.
Okay. From all kinds of places, the woods in Tennessee, just random places I could get a camera set up.
Any other questions? We have a few more minutes.
We have some more online.
Oh, okay. Let's get some online questions.
They're active on here, y'all.
I love that.
Let me. Yolanda Brown asks, how would the author, Kleaver, how would you like the book to be used in local government entities, organizations, and places of work to establish a greater spectrum of care, consent, and safety for Black people?
I'm gonna need some time. I think those are people too, and that for my interest or commitment is, if you're Black, is to be reminded. I keep saying that this is not an introduction or a discovery. That of all the people I've met and asked, what is Black joy mean to you? None of them was this like a new revelation. It was a reminder. It was like that. Oh yes, or the revelation might have been in the language of, I never called it that. Like I remember one guy started screaming on the Black joy man. Thank you. I never thought of it that way. But he kept saying like, that's my thing though. That's what everybody knows me as. Okay, that's who I am, the Black joy man. I'm like, run with that. But aside from language, I mean like the deep understanding was not new. And so to me, it would be to remind those folks in government of who you are. I also been telling people, which I argue in the book too, of if we consider the facts of how this little thing called humanity started, which was on this place called Africa, as we have language for it now, that's to say that the first people were Black people, which means joy was there too. In the middle of trying to figure out how we're gonna hunt and be in the cave and all these things, because cave people were probably melanated, for being honest. The first ones. That there was joy too, like they had to have had experiences of being in awe of flowers and mountains and all these things. That I'm saying all that to say of that's the well we get to pull from. Is that deep. Literally the origin of our being is how far we can pull from. So that we're not limited as we tend to the last 5 or 6 centuries, making it seem like that's our story when that's a part of our story. That's not our story. That's the most recent iterations of it. And I guess to really answer the question is, for me, this is the cause to fight for, right? Is to defend our joy, to protect our joys, which is a way to address the things that don't bring us joy. That I would want government, folks, politicians, or whatever to get behind that. Is if you're serious about protecting Black lives, that means you have to protect our joys. And if you're serious about protecting our joys, that means you have to get into what is affecting it, what is stealing our joys, what is prohibiting or making it so that we can't even experience it. That feels like a different entry than the tired stuff about blight assessment and just like that whole thing of the terrible Black life and we have to address it, as opposed to we're actually constantly doing what we need to do. What we don't get is the resources and support to make that happen for real. We just need our things. So maybe some of y'all just need to move out the way and give us our things. That's what I want. But my real question, my real answer, I need time to think about that. That's a deep question.
Any other questions? Well, we thank y'all for coming out tonight.
I want to take a selfie with y'all.
Hey, let's take a selfie. Oh, come on.
Oh, wait, there's a question.
Mike, sit up.
What else are you doing in Atlanta while you're here?
That's a really good question. I don't know. This is my first time here. I'm here to sign up for the stuff. Y'all have any ideas and stuff.
You gotta check out some roller skating. That is like
Ooh.
Black joy at its height. Atlanta is like the place for roller skating.
I'll be holding on to the side, but I'm like, I have skates. And me and my partner are like healing our children by our inner child by skating in the house, which is really great as a adult. I lie. I'm not skating. I'm like Ricky's like zooming through, but yeah, I'll
You got a date with me first tomorrow.
That's right, man. We're supposed to have lunch tomorrow.
You can have